So, a few weeks ago, I explained Hamon, the primary battle system from part 1 and 2 of the JoJo's franchise, and you guys really hated it, so the most logical next step was for me to cover stands. Stands come about in part 3 of the manga and have remained the primary battle system in place ever since, so I thought that this would be pretty cool to go over such a deep and complex concept that this battle system proves to be. I'll start by saying that this video is going to be an absolute mess if I don't break it up into sections, since there's a literal iceberg to cover here. So we'll be cutting this one up into chapters for the sake of organization and my sanity. The chapters will be split up based on the who, where, when, what, and why, and how of the stands in the JoJo's universe. Starting with the name, what a stand is, who can use it, how can a person awaken a stand, the different kind of stands that exist, the history behind them, how they influence the narrative, and also seeing just how they've evolved as the series went on. Of course, I'm Momoshiki of the Speed Wagon Foundation, and today we're going to be going over stands in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series. If you enjoy, why not give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this all the time? If you hate my guts, won't you tell me all about it in the comments below? But I won't hold you too long. Let's get back into this video because we're probably going to be here for a while. Thanks guys. Okay, so stands. What better place to start than the name? The origins for the name aren't as complex or in-depth as you typically find in most Eastern media. Rather, it's surprisingly simplistic in its reasoning. The name stand is directly linked to what they are and how they function, so I'll need to briefly go over that first. In the opening chapters of Stardust Crusaders, Jotaro explains that he has an evil spirit within him that only he can see. Therefore, he's locked himself in a jail cell and is refusing to leave for fear of who he may hurt. When Jotaro's grandfather Joseph finally arrives, he elaborates on this supernatural occurrence, telling Jotaro that what he believed to be an evil spirit is actually a powerful vision created by his life energy. Being that these visions stand beside a person, they would become known as stands, which isn't always true. Who it was that originally decided to call them stands is unknown, but it seems that after a certain point it just becomes common knowledge despite the fact that the name doesn't just come to users like it does in the Persona series. But we'll come back to why I think that is in the story relevant section of the video. Either way, the name for these beings isn't all too complicated. The complicated part is going over the seemingly endless possibilities that there seems to be when it comes to the application and appearances of stands. While stands may and can take on an almost unlimited number of appearances, thankfully they can be sorted into categories based on their utility. And typically, in battle is where the stand is most utilized, but there are of course some caveats which we'll go over. But if you wish to learn more about the different categories of stands, look no further than the stat charts, introduced in Venta Oro. I know that these stats get a bad rap, I'm looking at you Hermes, but they can be useful in placing stands into groups without putting too much stock into their specific skill grade. But stand stats should never be used as a primary metric when scaling stands. If you haven't read the manga, the stand charts have been replicated in the anime, giving official stats to stands that never got this treatment. These stats are separated into 6 categories, those being destructive force, speed, range, permanence, precision, and growth. In addition, every stand has a special ability that is, in most cases, unique to them, and in total, there are 176 unique stands across all 9 parts of the franchise. Now, let's get into our first chapter of the video, and that's going to be going over exactly what a stand actually is. This will be a super duper quick one, but as I already mentioned, a stand is described as a powerful vision created by a person's own life energy, deriving from strength of the mind and fighting spirit. This vision is typically personified into a being that only they and other stand users can see. Stand user, of course, being the term to describe those who possess such an ability. And this is important because while they can't be perceived by non-stand users, stands can still interact with and affect them, as well as the physical plane and objects among it, as seen when Jotaro's stand, Star Platinum, takes an officer's gun and catches the bullet once it's been fired, or when Miyamoto uses his stand Enigma to capture Josuke's mom, trapping her within a piece of paper. In essence, a stand is a person's fighting spirit, given life to become a fighting spirit, serving as a guardian which acts under the command of its user's will. Some stands have a mind and will of their own, can communicate, give advice, and so on, but more times than not, stands will silently operate under its user's direct orders. And Abdal explains to us in Chapter 8 of Stardust Crusaders that a stand is guided by a person's spirit to fight, and can only be used by such a will. This actually leads me perfectly into our next chapter, which will be answering the question of who can use a stand. So, many users are born with their stands, as seen with Polnareff and Emporio, whereas many others awaken their stand through way of Enyaba's Egyptian arrows or by entering the Devil's Palm in the Steel Ball Run era and after, both of which have an uncanny ability of awakening a person's dormant stand ability, which we'll be going over in the history section of the video. But being born a stand user isn't all too common. There are 2 possible conditions for someone to be born with a stand, and that is luck of the draw, or, more likely the case, inheriting it from a parent or ancestor who has a stand of their own, as we do see with Jolene, who doesn't awaken her stand at birth, but she is given the potential due to her being Jotaro's daughter. But like I said, being born this way isn't a common occurrence, nor is having the potential to awaken one, as, more times than not, when attempting to artificially awaken a stand, the recipient will die, having proved to be unworthy of wielding a stand of their own. People of all ages, from a newborn to the elderly, even animals, and to an even crazier extent, a cluster of plankton, have a small chance to awaken a stand. This is called the potential, but it does not exist in everyone, and those who do not possess it will die, as I said before. This is shown to us in Vented Audio when Popo is conducting his entrance exam on Journo. The true purpose of the exam was to pierce individuals with an arrow in order to create more stand users for his gang. It's stated in Popo's stand chart that the arrow will awaken a person's dormant stand ability or kill them outright if they are unworthy, as seen with the janitor who accidentally activated Popo's stand. But taking a moment to focus on the arrow a bit more, let's dive into the history section of the video so that we can take a look at where these arrows came from and try to pinpoint just how long stand users have been around. In chapter 113 of Golden Wind, Polnareff explains to us that in 1978, a team of surveyors were doing research in a Cape York, Greenland crater created by a fallen meteorite tens of thousands of years ago. Within the meteor lie a virus, and when two men of this survey team were infected by the virus, they both died horribly, but one awakened a stand before passing in an anomaly known as an instantaneous viral evolution. Traditional evolution occurs over the course of many generations, slowly and eventually becoming the standard. But this incident immediately rewrote these surveyors' DNA, awakening the man's dormant stand. Polnareff states that the virus rewards the survivors with a stand, and this is the same principle with the arrows since they are made from the same meteor. This is due to the body evolving by awakening its stand in order to survive. I know that there is some confusion that the arrow gives you a stand, but this isn't the case, as traditional evolution isn't being given the tools to survive. It hinges on those who have the tools necessary for surviving, being the primary ones to do so, and having offspring with your inherited ability or potential. Quick analogy for you: if a herd of giraffes with 4 feet long necks live in an area full of 4 feet tall acacia trees that they can eat the leaves and twigs from, and of course, this would be their main food source. Let's say one day, the 4 feet tall trees that they get all their food from stop growing leaves or run out or all fall down for whatever reason you want to come up with, and all that's left are the 6 feet tall trees that none of the herd can reach. Basically, there are no more 4-foot trees that this herd can eat from, therefore, none of the giraffes are able to eat, meaning that they will either migrate to an area with proper food source, or die off of starvation. Okay, now let's say that there are 2 giraffes in this herd born with 6 feet long necks as a birth defect. These giraffes will remain in this area since they are still able to eat from the 6-foot tall trees. They'll have children who have children, and eventually the only giraffes in the area will be those with 6 feet long necks. That is evolution. No one gave the giraffes 6 feet necks. Rather, it was within them all along, just like the stands are within a stand user, but unless you have the potential, or in this analogy, a 6 feet long neck gene, you will never survive the change. The only other way that we've seen a stand awaken is through Dio's rebirth. When Dio pierced himself using Jonathan Joestar's body, all of Jonathan's descendants were too granted stand abilities, 2 of which became real sick from this occurrence, consistent with the previous virus, that being Holly Kujo and Josuke Higashikita. The only reason that these 2 survived were due to Jotaro putting a stop to Dio, breaking the curse on them. This is explained as them being tied by fate. It's strange to think that there hasn't been a single Joestar up to part 7 that has been born with their stand. But in addition to the Joestar family, Dio's 4 children also awaken their stands upon their father's rebirth, one of which being Giorno, and the rest appearing in Stone Ocean, under the command of Father Pucci. And this is all fate shenanigans working their way into the Joestar and Brando bloodline. Okay, now that we've got the history of part 3 through 6 out of the way, let's take a look at Steel Ball Run's version of this origin. It is explained by Mountain Tim that there is an unmapped area of the Arizona desert, one of which is the infamous Devil's Palm. This area is highly volatile, even traveling miles a day. According to the natives of the area, a meteor crashed in the region now known as the Devil's Palm tens of thousands of years ago, destroying everything and cursing the land. This meteor has given the land the ability to awaken stands in the many who enter and kill the rest if they do not harbor the potential. And a person can unknowingly step into the Devil's Palm and awaken a stand, as we do see with Johnny Joestar. Also, this isn't important, but Mountain Tim calls these newfound abilities stands just for no reason at all. Even if Joseph's reasoning was kinda simple, it at least had a reason for the name. The reason I think that this is because of the phenomenon known as gravitation. In the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series, it's been explained numerous times that stand users are naturally attracted to each other. Therefore, it is impossible for someone to live their whole life having never met another stand user. More than likely, the name stand has been passed down and along to other users over the course of history, and this is why the name seems to have been common knowledge among protagonists and antagonists alike, since the information has to come from somewhere. So you're probably not wondering at all, how do stands affect the overall story of the JoJo's franchise? And the answer is in every imaginable way possible. This series revolves around stands like how Pokemon is with its namesake. So much so that many of the additional content like novels and such attempt to retroactively insert stands into phantom blood and battle tendency. Of course, the JoJo series is about the Joestar family line, but from part 3 and onward, stands become the driving force of the plot. From Dio to Diavolo to Pucci, their goal always begins and ends with their stands, eventually using them to rewrite the world in their image and attain complete power. This is where the Joestars come in. As Jotaro puts it to Kakyoin, your stand gets to hide from its victims, the law, and consequences. Therefore, he will be the judge, acting on the side of fate to denounce all evil and uphold justice. And he states that Star Platinum will be the stand that upholds justice. And time after time, the Joestars and those that follow them use their stands to battle and snuff out the evil of the world. But battling evil can't be easy. That is, unless your stand has a broken ability or some crazy stats to work with. And this brings us to the next chapter of the video, and that's going to be covering the different types of stands and categorizing them in a format that makes sense. Stands, in terms of battle capability, are typically organized based on their range. Range meaning the amount of distance a stand's abilities can affect or travel to. Not equally as important, but still worth going over, is their physical appearance, which we'll get to afterwards. So let's start with the simplest of the bunch, and that's going to be the short range stance, or close range. This includes stands such as Star Platinum, Zahando, Killer Queen, and Enigma. Stands of the short range ilk typically make up for their poor range with impressive speed and strength, though this isn't always the case as seen with Adam, which isn't really a combat-oriented stand. Many short range stands focus on dealing heavy damage with a flurry of punches and/or kicks. The strongest of these close range stands usually focus all of their effort into a singular, usually fatal blow, much like King Crimson. Of course, there are exceptions, like with Killer Queen, who mainly focuses on explosions, meaning that he can affect a larger area than just his physical reach, but he's still considered a close range stand. These stands can't go too far from their users, and as the case for most stands, any damage taken on their end is immediately dealt to the host as well. And when competing with a long-ranged enemy, these stands are at a major disadvantage, and will require some clever trickery, but not necessarily completely outclassed. Next up, we have our long-range stands, which are able to operate from a much further distance from their user than a close-range stand can. This category includes stands such as Emperor, Aerosmith, Lovers, and Red Hot Chili Pepper. These stands tend to, of course, thrive in the range section, but typically are lacking in the strength department. It's important to note that just because a stand is categorized as a range type, doesn't mean that they specialize in projectiles. In many cases, a long-range stand just signifies that a stand is able to travel much further from their user, but can still be controlled with precision. These stands are better off used for sneak attacks, but there are stands such as Red Hot Chili Pepper, which have incredible speed and power as well as being a range type, which isn't the norm. Much like their close-range counterparts, any damage dealt to a range stand will affect its user. After that, we have automatic or remote control stands, not to be confused with long-range stands, have the capability to travel any distance from their user, acting completely independent aside from a single prime directive in line with its user's will. This is seen with Chariot Requiem, Killer Queen's sub-ability Sheer Heart Attack, and Notorious B.I.G., which all can continue to hunt their targets while its user continues on with their day. As explained by Koichi in Chapter 16 of Golden Wind, remote control stands don't affect the user at all, but if he did feel anything, it would be his hand feeling heavy. And this is seen with Kira in Part 4 when Koichi weighs down his Sheer Heart Attack, pinning Kira's hand down as well, but nothing else. Sheer Heart Attack is a strange case since it operates as an automatic stand, but still affects its user to a certain extent. But traditionally, an automatic stand like Highway Star is activated, and once it's defeated, its user will be none the wiser. The biggest anomaly seen is with Notorious B.I.G., as even once its user was killed, the automatic stand continued to hunt Butarati's team, kept alive by nothing more than its user's vindictive energy alone. Finally, we have stands that don't really operate within a range, whether it's because their abilities aren't combat oriented or because they have evolved to the point of range being irrelevant. This includes stands such as Gold Experience Requiem, Moody Blues, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Underworld. These stands' abilities work regardless of range, and this category includes some of the strongest stands in the series. The only real comparison to be made between these stands is the lack of a traditional combat skill set, allowing their abilities to affect the enemy regardless of distance. In addition to their physical capabilities, every stand has a special ability. Most stands are unique, but there are instances of stands' abilities being shared or having different variations of the same ability. This is, of course, very rare and usually goes unexplained in the main continuity, so they're considered anomalies within the franchise. I've touched on this in previous videos, but the strongest of stands typically have abilities that either affect the flow of time or defy it completely, i.e. Made in Heaven, Star Platinum, The World, King Crimson, and Killer Queen's upgrade Bites the Dust. Aside from that, stand abilities will range anywhere from being an invincible zombie, to having complete control over fire, to letting off a poisonous gas that you can't control, to being able to repair anything that you've broken, and even abilities like being able to project images from anywhere in the world, like we see with Joseph's stand, Hermit Purple. But coming back to upgrades of stands, stands have the ability to naturally grow and unlock new abilities over time. This has been seen with Star Platinum and Echoes. The other way a stand can evolve is by being pierced with one of the many special arrowheads scattered around the world, or through extremely special means like the case was with Poochie's 3 stands. Although Jarno was pierced with the arrow a total of 3 times in Golden Wind, only the final time does it awaken his evolved stand. It is told to us that the arrow chooses who is worthy, and those who are not will lose complete control of their stands while they rampage on, nearly unstoppable like Chariot Requiem. The only other thing we have to cover now are the appearances that a stand can have, which don't really affect its overall ability most of the time, but we'll go over some of the ones that do first. Firstly, we have our natural stands, meaning ones that can take the form of things in nature, and the best example of this are Geb, Tower of Grey, Aqua Necklace, and Lovers. The form that these stands take are essential in their function, as Angelo needs to be able to become part of any liquid, and Lovers needs to be able to enter a person's ear to take over their brain. Next, we have wearable stands that work as a suit for its user. These, when worn, give its user incredible capabilities. These are absolutely essential for how its stand works. Now, we have non-natural or material stands. These are stands that take the form of man-made objects and can be seen by non-stand users. This includes stands such as Wheel of Fortune, a car, Strength, a boat, Superfly, an electric tower, and Anubis, a sword. The most common, but least relevant appearance are the humanoid stands, like The World, Diver Down, and Silver Chariot. In addition, there are humanoid stands that have robotic characteristics, along the lines of Judgment. Lastly, we have form-irrelevant stands. Much like Bohemian Rhapsody, since it has no form, these stands operate as divine miracles rather than as abilities that you can see coming from a visible stand. It's important to mention that a stand can be mixed and matched with the range and form types, creating a vast amount of variations. Like I said before, in total, there are 176 unique stands across the franchise, from Stardust Crusaders to Jojo Lands, and I'm sure that there will be more to come as time goes on. When the series first began, stands were pretty simple, having practical abilities like pyrokinesis, reviving an army of the undead, and attacking a person in their dreams. Now, things have grown a little bit more complex, which definitely speaks to the charm of the series. I think JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is all about the complex. But yeah, that's stands. In my Hamon video, I mentioned that while I really like the previous battle system, stands are by far my favorite of the two. But I'm genuinely curious which one you guys prefer between the two, and also, what's your favorite stand in the series so far? Let me know down below in the comments, and if you enjoyed, won't you give the video a thumbs up since it really helps my channel out, and this video took a crazy amount of research and work, but I honestly do it for you guys. Also, maybe consider subscribing for more JoJo content like this all the time. If you have any suggestions for other videos or you want to hear me explain any other concepts in the JoJo franchise, let me know below. I'd love to know what you guys want to see. But thanks for watching, y'all. Have a good day. I'm out. Holla!